And I'm very proud to say that sat right next to me now is former Speaker of the House and GOP presidential hopeful, Newt Gingrich. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Crystal Studio.
Well, it's great to be back, and Simon, great to be with you, and great to be back in the Crystal Studio. I'm looking forward both to the parade later on today and then to the fair opening tomorrow morning. It is the best state fair in the country, and our two grandchildren, Maggie and Robert, are going to be here with me, and they're looking forward to it. Their father's going to try to eat one of every single fried thing here, which will,
really?
If it happens, we're thinking about tweeting each one as he eats them, which will set a world record, I think.
I have some bad news for him, because this year you can get deep-fried butter on a stick.
Yes, it's one of the several things he's looking forward to. I can't vouch for him. All I can tell you is he's made a commitment to go all out.
Wow. Well, I can feel my arteries hardening from here. We have a bit of a crowded studio. We've got Bonnie Lucas in here. She's waving because we didn't give her a microphone. She's done enough of that today. And niece, is that?
Madison.
Madison's in here as well. Hi, Madison. And you and I, Mr. Speaker, are the guinea pigs, because this is the first time we're trying out the Crystal Studio this year. So we'll figure out if it works. But it is a great pleasure to have you here, sir. I want to get straight into it because our time is pretty limited. And when it comes to what we just witnessed in D.C. with regard to the debt ceiling, I believe everyone, and I do mean everyone, is lying to us. Because when you take into account the unfunded expenditure that we know is coming, the true debt that we're facing right now is $120 trillion.
Well, I think that the language of Washington and the language of reality have no common place. And the more I've thought about this agreement, the more unhappy I am with it.
Yep.
From a variety of levels. I mean, one is I don't believe you ought to have 12 people trying to decide the fate of the country. I think that denies the whole legislative process.
We got their names now as well.
Yeah, and I'm totally uninspired by this whole process. But in addition, the idea that we're going to decide the national security requirements of the United States based on American politicians' inability to work with each other as adults just strikes me as horrifying, and as a historian, just strikes me as very, very dangerous. But there's a further thing that's wrong about the whole picture in Washington right now. Unless you fix the economy, you can't possibly get to a balanced budget. I helped develop the first 4 balanced budgets in modern times. We paid off $405 billion in debt. One of the keys to that was actually a tax cut, not a tax increase. And the reason was we had the largest capital gains tax cut in history. Unemployment went down from 5.6% to 4.2%. And it was putting people back to work, getting them off of welfare, off of food stamps, off of Medicaid, off of unemployment, back to taking care of their family, earning a living, paying taxes, that made a huge difference. I don't see anybody in Washington talking seriously
no one
about
is.
what it would take to get this economy growing again. And as a result, it's pretty clear to me the economy is decaying. It's not.
With the obvious exception of those who voted no, we have to, give a hat tip to them. They did vote no. Everybody is lying, though. They're talking about this as a cut. Well, they didn't cut anything except the level of increase. By 2021, we're now looking at $22 trillion of debt, if you believe them, which I don't, instead of $24 trillion of debt. Well, whoop-de-doo. Who cares? And in terms of the spending, the discretionary spending next year, they cut $7 billion. It's less than 2 days of our deficit spend, never mind the rest of the spend. It's nonsense, isn't it?
Somebody said it was like a family that was in real trouble that got together, had a long meeting, and decided they knew how to cut out $12.
Yeah.
It wouldn't solve anything. But let me carry it a step further. One of the structural reforms that would make a difference would be to abolish what's called the current services budget. The current services budget is as though your teenage children could come in and say to you, I deserve a $20 increase in my allowance every month. And you say, well, I can't afford 20, I can only give you 5. And they say, you're cutting my allowance $15 because I deserve 20. If you simply eliminate this kind of phony budgeting, you would automatically get back to a more honest conversation, because every increase would be called an increase.
Yes.
And that by itself, which I had a huge fight over this in '96, and candidly I lost, because we kept insisting that when we were increasing Medicare, it was an increase, even if it wasn't as big an increase as the baseline. And we won the argument for that year, but what we should have done in retrospect is we should have passed a law that changed the budgeting system so that a dollar increase counted as a dollar increase, and you didn't have any kind of phony baseline, which is a liberal device to maximize the growth of government.
But we've also got to take into account this unfunded spending. To me, it's the same. I used this analogy yesterday of, the cell phone bill is arriving, and you know roughly what it's going to be. I know what mine's going to be pretty much every month. But you're not accounting for it because you don't actually have physical possession of the bill yet. I mean, that is nonsense. It's $120 trillion. Nobody is being serious. Somebody needs to get serious, don't they?
Well, they do. And beyond that, remember that also all the hidden costs the federal government imposes. One of the great challenges for this Committee of 12 would be to say to the states, tell us all the unnecessary red tape, the unnecessary regulations, the unnecessary burdens, which if we eliminated them, you would also give up the federal money that pays for them. And I think you'd find states queuing up to say, if you'll eliminate the following 12 things that we're currently having to pay people to fill out forms. I was told, for example, under the Dodd Frank bill, that there are banks in Nebraska that now plan to hire 1.2 people just for red tape for every person they hire to deal with customers.
Crazy.
Yeah, and so when you look at the hidden cost of the federal government, it is even greater and is another reason why the economy is in so much trouble.
Well, I'm going to take a very quick time out for some traffic and weather, and when we come back, you're going to give us the solution, right?
Well, I'll talk about how we could do it.
Excellent. Live in studio, in the Crystal Studio, no less, at the Iowa State Fairgrounds, with former Speaker of the House and GOP presidential hopeful Newt Gingrich. Welcome back, sir.
Good to be here.
Now, I just asked you what the solution was, and I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek, but someone has to get serious, and I'm hoping it might be you.
Well, I think first of all, you have to understand that unless you get real change, you're not going to get real change. So when politicians get up and say, we're faced with this gigantic problem, and here's my tiny, itty-bitty, small suggestion, they're not serious. There are a series of steps I would take. Again, I would start by focusing on jobs, because unless you get the economy moving, you can't pay for all the stuff you want to do, and you can't solve the deficit. And then I would also, in parallel, deal with the government. So let me talk about a couple things. I'd repeal the Dodd Frank bill, which is a banking bill that is killing the economy. You can ask any banker in Iowa, ask any realtor, ask any small business person, they'll tell you Dodd Frank is killing the economy. And you could repeal it tomorrow morning if the Congress would just agree to do it. I'd also repeal the Sarbanes Oxley bill, which has killed all small startups and has really been a very big burden on American businesses. Then I would pivot and I would look at applying what Strong America Now here in Iowa, the group that's been out organizing, describes as Lean Six Sigma, which sounds funny, but it is the system that allows people like Boeing and Motorola to be competitive in the world market. Michael George, who helped create Lean Six Sigma, believes if you applied it to the federal government, you would take $500 billion a year out of the cost of government. That's $5 trillion over a 10-year period. It begins to be real money. I think you've also got to look at the 10th Amendment and say, what should come back home that the federal government shouldn't be doing at all? I mean, why not, if you were to block grant Medicaid and move it back home, the estimate is it would save $700 billion over the next 10 years. And if you go out further than that, it saves even more. But I also think you need very innovative thinking. One of the areas I'm working on, which may surprise you coming from a candidate, is brain science. And the reason is we're going to learn more about the human brain than any other aspect of life in the next 25 years. That affects Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's, schizophrenia, and learning theory, a whole range of things that affect humans. Alzheimer's alone is $20 trillion, public and private cost, from now to 2050. If you got a breakthrough in Alzheimer's that postponed it for 5 years, you save $10 trillion. Now that's getting to a change by doing something different, by doing it better, by being creative. So I'm just giving you a sense that
absolutely.
Don't think of it as a single magic wand, but say to yourself, could you get somebody who knows enough that they could organize the teams to methodically, step by step, change the whole game? and then you'd all of a sudden find that it was very manageable.
Do we not have to seriously address the entitlements, though?
Absolutely.
But I mean, seriously, I'm talking about the kind of thing like saying to 35-year-olds right now, sorry, you've got to make some other arrangements. We just don't have the money.
Well, I'd say to 35-year-olds, you want to have a personal Social Security account that you control, that is your money that you put in there. Mm-hmm. And Barack Obama is going to become the poster child for why you don't want to trust politicians. If you look at his quotes on television where he said, we may not be able to send you your Social Security check, and you take those quotes to every college and high school in the country and say, do you really want to spend your entire working lifetime wondering which year the politicians are going to rip you off? Or would you like to go to a brand new Social Security system where you put your money in the system and it builds up interest over time and it's your money, but you don't expect anybody else to take care of you?
That's right. That's
and
exactly
I think
right.
That's how fundamental the change is going to have to be.
Okay. Well, I'm very pleased to hear you talk about that. In the limited time we've got left, let's talk about your campaign. Didn't get off to the best of starts. I think you would agree with that. And poll-wise, you're not running that great at the moment. Is there a number that you have to achieve at the straw poll in order for you to stay in this race, sir?
No. We have not tried to compete in the straw poll. We haven't spent any money on the straw poll. We obviously would love anybody who goes there to vote for us if they want to. But our commitment is to try to see if we can't win in January. And our theory is very simple. We are in serious trouble. Substance is really going to matter. I've offered a proposal for a 21st Century Food and Drug Administration. I've offered a proposal for an Environmental Solutions Agency to replace EPA. You and I have just been talking about a whole series of solutions right now.
Absolutely.
My gamble and my belief in the American people is that this is one of those really unusual elections where people are going to be worried enough that they're going to pay attention to substance, and that you're going to see in October and November and December a really decisive shift towards what do we need to do, who could really do it, who could stand up to Obama in a debate next year in October, because he's going to have $1 billion to smear the Republican nominee.
Absolutely.
And so you're going to have somebody who can go nose to nose with him and win the debates. And if they won, can they then in fact actually govern and actually change Washington? And that will be a tremendous task. I tell people, I don't want you to be for me. I want you to be with me. And the difference is if you're for me, you vote, you go home, you say, I hope he fixes it. If you're with me, I'm going to need you for 8 years to get this job done.
So what you're telling me, just so that we're completely clear, is that no matter what happens this weekend at the straw poll, Newt Gingrich is still in the race on Monday.
Absolutely, totally. I believe we can win this. I believe that, in fact, if you look at Gallup today, my numbers were back up significantly. And that's without spending any advertising money. It's just by the earned media of talking about really serious, substantial reform in a way that I think makes me probably different from most candidates.
We're expecting, obviously, another candidate to jump in this weekend. There's no secret. We're looking at an extremely likely entrance from Rick Perry. Sarah Palin is still on the periphery, but a lot of people, serious people that I know, expect her to run as well. Do you think that the field is strong enough to produce a candidate to take down the president in 2012? Well,
I think the president is bad enough. He's going to take himself down.
So no matter who?
I think if we continue to have this kind of economy, if we continue to have this kind of weakness in foreign policy, if we continue to have this kind of a disaster on energy policy, we have this kind of disaster on the deficit, all you have to do is run an ad in October of next year that says, can you really afford 4 more years of this? And I think he loses.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a couple of final questions before I let you go. I've got to keep an eye on the clock here. We're a very unusual situation, not having my proper clock. So let me ask you a couple of final questions. You just said he's going to beat himself. So does it matter who the candidate is?
It matters who the candidate is for a very powerful reason. You better have somebody who can actually govern. Because it's not just about defeating Obama. It's about replacing bad government in Washington, replacing bad bureaucracies, replacing bad laws. That requires somebody who can help elect at least 12 Republican U.S. Senate candidates and at least 30 to 40 more House candidates, and who has had the experience. And I think one of the advantages I have is I'm the only candidate in the race who led an effort to reform a national entitlement, welfare, who led an effort to get the economy growing, and who helped balance the budget for 4 straight years.
Okay. We can agree, I think, that he's a lousy president. I don't think there's too many people that would disagree. I know liberals that think he's a lousy president. And I've got about 30 seconds left. But he's a great candidate. Are we underestimating him by saying these things are going to take him down? I mean, he really knows how to run.
As I said, you had better have a nominee who can win the debates in October, because when you have an incumbent president with $1 billion to spend who is willing to say anything, they're going to be formidable, but I think in the end they're going to lose.
Newt Gingrich, thank you so much for joining me today.